To grow up in the early 21st century is to grow up with self awareness of all that came before. This is to say that with the advent of the internet in the mid to late 1990s, this generation had access to culture and information at a level that was exponentially larger than any past generation. And this manifested in a few ways in the early 21st century, with the millennials being the first generation to partially grow up with this access. Culture was augmented, mixed, and expanded upon in some cool ways. Think the popularizing of world beat or the growth of internet memes. These were very early examples led by millennials of what mass media in a global environment would look like. And there was hope, palpable hope, in the early to mid 2010s that this would lead to a greater understanding among different backgrounds, that it could actually help with our journey of integration in parts of the world like the US, and that maybe when Gen Z came of age, a generation completely immersed in this landscape, that we would be operating on a whole new level. Global events, democratic backsliding, and wealth disparity in the past 10 years have had an indelible impact on this trajectory, and to an extent point out some of the naivety of it. 2020 in particular discombobulated our perception of things and caused a form of backsliding for Gen Z itself. Like, wasn't it a little weird that for a time in the early 2020s we were obsessed with Y2K aesthetic or trad aesthetic? Or that whenever I went to the club, the only music that they would play was late 2000s and early 2010s pop music. And they still play this at many clubs today. Like, this is the majority of the music that they play. To put that in perspective, think if in 2000 they mostly played music from 1985. Or, by God, think if in 1970 they played music from 1955. This is to say that instead of building off of the cultures that came before, to create something new, as prior generations did, Gen Z, at its worst, has been a shallow imitation of things in the past and, at best, discombobulated, disassociated. And there's grace to be given to the latter conclusion. These are very discombobulating times. Yet I'd argue that there was a time where a cohesive Gen Z culture was forming. Let's first define the age cohort that is Gen Z. 1997 through 2012 are typically considered the years that encompass Gen Z, meaning that anyone currently between the ages of 28 and 13 fall into this cohort. These large gaps in generational cohorts aren't unusual, but do point to variations within generations that are worth highlighting. For instance, although those born in 1997 and 1998 are categorically Gen Z, they were influenced culturally by the millennials that came before them, whether that be in school or church or wherever. Same goes for those born in 2011 and 2010. They are culturally influenced by Gen Alpha. This is to say, it takes a few years for Gen Z to be culturally formed as a distinct culture. Thus, we can start looking at those born right at the turn of the century as the first subgroup to be influenced by Gen Z on both ends of their upbringing. And as this generation came of age in the mid to late 2010s, it had a few distinct markers. We can start off with music, where with the advent of low-cost music production software, young people could create their own music and disseminate it on platforms like Spotify or SoundCloud. With this, and access to mass media, music was being mixed and mashed with different parts of culture in a very new and innovative way. To be fair, this was kickstarted by young millennials and early Gen Z, but for Gen Z core, this is the music they came up with. We can look similarly at fashion, where yes, there were distinct trends like skinny jeans and bomber jackets, but also a culture where everything was on the table clothing-wise. Bow bottoms mixed with sweat jackets, or parachute pants with oversized shirts, and shoes, particularly if or how you styled them, were a big deal. But most importantly, what defined Gen Z at this point in time, the through line between these prior examples and more, was an engagement with many different things at a large yet confined scale. And through this, for those who truly engage sincerely, a very grounded form of identity and sense of self that completely flipped the status quo on its head. 2020 had an indelible impact on this. In short, with the many things at a large yet confined scale in that year, Gen Z lost a sense of itself. It became too meta, as you will, and people retreated to an idea of a more simple time. And for the young ones coming up, this idea of a more simple time is just how it is. We have, to varying degrees, backslid to old cultural norms, whether that be in the realm of race, gender, fashion, music. And although many aspects of our current political moment have been baked in for some time, our generation's response has definitely accelerated its development. I think back to late 2016. Halfway through my first semester in high school, I'm in a bit of a slump, and for some reason I decided to download Spotify. I had MP3 songs saved on my phone and YouTube if I wanted to listen to something else, but this was my first music streaming service. And for some reason, I hadn't grasped the scope of music that could be streamed. It was like walking into a library of endless books. And so, like many, I just absorbed all that I could engage with. And like many, started to curate a playlist that captured different genres and taste and seasons in my life. And at a certain point, started to create playlists outside of strict subsets and compartmentalization. Why compartmentalize? I can, nothing against it, but I could also do anything with what's available. I can create a playlist that's completely unprecedented and new.
Want a break from the ads? If you tap now to watch a short video, you'll receive 30 minutes of ad-free music. Yes, really. If you tap now to watch a short video, you'll receive 30 minutes of ad-free music.